The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to Insights, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing the Alpena Flyer. It's the only one left in the world. And for my first guest, I have Bob Lingus from the Alpena County Library. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Now, you've been studying the Alpena Flyer for quite some time, correct?
Yes, I have. I taught school here in Alpena for 30 years, and I specialized in local history. And the classes were very popular. The students were very interested in it. So I knew about the Flyer from very early on and was always intrigued that one didn't survive. There were bits and pieces around, little emblems, maybe a speedometer or something like that. But as far as the whole vehicle, there were none. And basically, there weren't a lot produced, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah. So what was so intriguing about the Flyer that made you want to start researching it?
Well, I'm thinking here we are in the little town of Alpena, far away from the manufacturing centers in Detroit, and I'm wondering how in the world did it get started here? And of course, in the late 1890s, early 1900s, there was a great interest in automobiles, especially when the internal combustion engine was used for automobiles. And so a lot of the early pioneer owners like Olds and Leland and Buick and Cadillac and Ford were working hard at perfecting the automobile, and they did a very good job at it. Some of them were toying with steam, some with electricity, but the internal combustion engine was the one that came here to stay. So the public was very interested and business grew. The first automobiles in Alpena were sold here in 1903. There were just a handful of them. And they set the speed limit then at 6 miles an hour.
Oh, wow. Quite different from today.
Absolutely. Alpena, at the end of the lumbering era, a lot of people were worried about its economy. The lumber had all been cut. What were they going to do next? They started developing the limestone and cement industry. And there were a number of wealthy families and wealthy investors in Alpena looking for chances to invest their money. And they thought, like a lot of other little towns in Michigan, let's build a car. And so a group of people got together. David Hanover was elected as president. The company was incorporated in 1910. And what I find interesting about Hanover, the first president of an automobile company, is his business before that was running a livery stable and a harness shop taking care of horses. So we have a major switch in the types of things that he did.
So Hanover was the one who decided, I want to bring a car to Alpena and start developing it, correct?
Yes, yes. And so they sold shares. And the library has, in our special collections department, quite a collection book on the Alpena Flyer, and you're welcome, anyone's welcome to come down and look at that. They built the factory, which still exists today. It's part of the Besser Company, one of their existing buildings.
So it's located at Besser?
At Besser itself, yes. And another thing I found kind of interesting is they built it using the huge brick paving bricks that were used in the streets of Alpena. It wasn't long after that that Alpena started making cement streets. And I believe, but I have to look at it, Detroit was the first, but we were not very long after. They did a mile of Woodward Avenue, and they did Chisholm Street from 1st down to 5th Avenue. So the building's up, and they're ready to start producing the Alpena Flyer.
And now, were there a bunch of people that worked in this company to produce the vehicles?
Yes, there was a fairly good-sized workforce. It was not an assembly line like we're used to today. It was what was called bench-made. Each one was produced individually. They would put the chassis on a frame, and then people would bring parts to the chassis, and then they would assemble it and go on from there.
So basically all the workers had their own jobs they did within the factory, and they would hand make every single car by putting the
it was
pieces
like a team that was doing that. So it was really kind of interesting.
Now, were the cars expensive to make?
I'm not sure about the wholesale cost, but the retail price was in the $700 to $1,000 range, which was pretty pricey and probably would be about $30,000 today. So it was not a common car. Henry Ford at the other end of the spectrum was trying to make the car less expensive so everyone could have one. And the people here were interested in a luxury vehicle, and it was a very fine car.
So do you think that the Alpina Flyer is sort of the luxury version of maybe the Model T?
In a way, yes, yes. And you have to remember that there were dozens of other towns the size of Alpena in Michigan producing cars also. So the competition was pretty fierce.
Okay, and so what do you think made the Alpina Flyer stand out from the other brands that were being sold?
I think the quality of its workmanship especially. It's a beautiful car, as you can see from the other pictures. That royal blue is just amazing. It was a very powerful car. They drove it on long-distance drives across the country. It was in a number of car shows. There was even one shipped to Australia, which is pretty amazing for that time, and it's something I would like to look into to see if maybe it's there.
Yeah.
It would be fun to see.
And I know you told me that there's a rumor that one of your family members had one of these cars, correct?
Well, supposedly one of my uncles on the farm in Royston bought one of them, and that probably would have been in the 1920s or maybe early 1930s, and probably adapted it to use as a farm vehicle. We have no pictures of it. It's just a story, and some of my uncles like to spin stories, so I'm not quite sure. They never knew what happened to it, but my suspicion is that during either the First World War, well, they probably had it during the Second World War, cars were scrapped at that time by just driving them up on a stone pile in a field and letting them rust away. And during the Second World War, when metal was very scarce, a lot of these cars were taken and melted down for their scrap value. So if it's true, that's probably what happened to it.
And if your family members did have one, it would be very rare, correct? Because not many people in the area had one, right?
No, they were still using horses, of course, at the time too. So. And
since they were so expensive, people who did own the cars were wealthier, correct?
Yes, absolutely. That was absolutely true. A lot of the lumber barons in town owned them. A lady came into the library the other day bringing a picture of somebody in the Alpena Flyer, and it was her great uncle who was a chauffeur for one of the Fletcher family.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Members, and she wrote up a little history of that, so we have that.
All right, Bob, well, I just want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing a little bit about the history of the vehicle with us.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be able to be in on this, and to thank the Ron Winter for what he has done for Alpena and what he has done for this community. It's really great.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And stick around, we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Insights. I am now here with Danielle, who works at Besser Museum, and you're going to tell us more about the Alpena Flyer, correct?
Yes.
Now, eventually the company closed down, correct?
Yes. In 1914, they closed down due to a lawsuit that was brought upon them by Mr. Emil Huber. He had actually had patented a part of the Alpena Flyer, not particular to this car, that basically the company infringed upon, and the lawsuit was placed for roughly $14,000, which even today is enough to bankrupt some companies. But that had been applied in 1913, and by 1914, the Alpena Motor Car Company was no more.
So after the lawsuit, they had to close down. Now, at that time, do you know how many cars had been made and were out in the public?
In regards to how many Flyers, I know it was approximately 428 cars, and regarding the other 13 models that the company produced, I am not sure.
Okay.
But it was fortunate, because when that company closed, Mr. Herman Besser was actually able to purchase the Alpena Motor Car Company for his Besser Company. So
okay, and then that's how Besser started?
That is how Besser Company started.
Okay. Now, like you said, there were 400 and how many?
28.
28. And nobody knows what happened to any of those, correct?
They just kind of disappeared into the ephemera, and nobody knows. There were always rumors that there was one either at an uncle's house or a friend's house or in a field, but nobody could back up the statements, and we just had no idea there were any around.
So, Ron Winters, correct? He
Correct.
found one.
Yes.
And he's not saying how he found it, correct?
No, he's kind of keeping that little secret to himself, I think just giving it a shroud of mystery, but he was able to locate one, and I know he had been searching for decades because several other individuals in the community have been searching for decades. Where he found his, we're not sure, but he can keep that secret, but he did find one, and that is the one we have now.
Maybe one day he'll tell us.
Maybe.
So once he found it, he went through a restoration process, correct?
Yes, yes. He actually took his car to Restoration Unlimited, which is an Illinois-based company, and they basically rebuilt the car. I know initially they had to strip the body off of the car, put parts of it onto the chassis, see what was missing, what needed to be replaced, and then just overall assessing the work that needed to be done, which turned out to be a great deal of work.
And what was some of the work that was done to restore it?
Well, I know that they ultimately ended up looking to restore a lot of the brass features on the car, and they were unable to basically find those at any given location, so those had to be milled in the shop. They also, from my understanding, had a hard time relocating some of the lanterns that are on the car because of the nature of them, so those actually were recrafted by Restoration Unlimited as well.
Okay. And then once it was all restored, because they had to do everything.
Everything.
Okay. And you said the brass, those parts couldn't be found, so they had to make those.
Yes.
Right. Do you know how long it took them to do the whole restoration process?
From my understanding, it took roughly 3 to 4 years because Mr. Winters had found the car about 3 years ago, from my understanding, and had started the process. Then we got wind of it, and we just kind of had to meet him, discuss it, because we've been searching for something in terms of the Alpina Flyer. Because with our collections, we only have a couple hood ornaments and a gas gauge and a piece of the Alpina Motor Company plate. Finding the extant car was something we were fantasizing about as a staff here at the Besser Museum. And I know not just our current staff, but decades past.
Right. And I'm sure Mr. Winters was thrilled when he found one and was able to have it restored, wasn't he?
I'm imagining he was like a child on Christmas getting the toys he wanted to see the most.
And now, do you know if it was expensive for him to have the whole thing restored?
I'm guessing so. The restoration company that he took it to actually had stated that it was the first car that they'd ever restored that was going back to its hometown,
Wow.
which I believe gives it a little bit of significance in terms of it doesn't happen often, and then just in terms that this car was only produced in terms of 428 cars, it makes it far more significant to find one that was capable of being fully restored.
Okay, so no other cars then in the U.S. have ever been restored?
Not to our knowledge, and I know the gentleman at Restoration Unlimited did look. They
Okay.
did, and they found nothing.
Wow, it's so interesting that he was able to find it and then have it all restored, and
Yes.
it's so beautiful now.
Oh, it is absolutely gorgeous, and we're absolutely, completely in deep gratitude to him for getting it.
So this is exactly what it looked like when it was produced, correct?
Correct. This would be what it looked like the day it rolled off its factory floor.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about why this car is so special to Besser. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everyone. I'm still sitting here with Danielle, who is the collections manager at Besser. And now the Alpina Flyer is here, correct?
Yes.
And it's here to stay for a while, is that right?
As long as Mr. Winters will let us hang on to it, we're hoping to display the Alpina Flyer almost indefinitely, but we'll see how charitable he's feeling.
Right. And what does it mean to you guys? I'm sure you've been wanting the Alpina Flyer here as an exhibit for a long time, correct?
Yes, I know when I first started at the museum 4 years ago, there was mention of how very cool it would be to have an Alpina Flyer here, but we had no idea there was one even extant or even a body existing. So it was always just kind of a pipe dream. Then when Mr. Winters actually let us know that he was working on a full restoration of an Alpina Flyer, it was very huge and significant for us, partially because the Besser Museum has its roots with Besser Company.
Correct.
And then Besser Company has its roots taking over the manufacturing company's building that the Alpina Flyer was made in. So you can actually still visit, technically, the footprint of the factory that made the Alpina Flyer, because it is on Johnson Street where the Besser Manufacturing Company is today.
So it's located kind of right behind it?
Kind of right behind it. It's on the grounds. You may have to dig. I don't know if the staff will enjoy that, but it's definitely right in that vicinity.
So it's not, people in the community can't go and tour it, but if you were to drive around, you could see it a little bit.
Yes.
And the car is so beautiful. It's like a piece of artwork, a piece of history.
Absolutely.
Many people say.
Yes, well, in terms of its craftsmanship, it definitely was produced in a more artisanal fashion, only because basically you had several different craftsmen working on it hands-on. There was no refined process such as today where you'll see the machine assembly or just the mass assembly that Mr. Ford pioneered. This was hands-on individual craftsmanship working on individual pieces. You may have one man milling the brass pieces for the headlights or other components, and then have an entirely other man working on the leather upholstery that is on the inside of the car. So it's a very individualized artistic approach to an automobile, which is one of the reasons why the price point on the car was so high for that time in history.
Now, what type of people would own this vehicle?
It definitely would have been more of a luxury item, so higher ups. I know that Alan Fletcher, actually a local gent, did own one. He had a chauffeur to drive it for him, however. It was definitely not an everyday individual's car. You did need a little bit of wealth in order to buy it. I know Bob had mentioned the difference in price between then and now, making it a roughly $30,000+ vehicle.
And back then that was a ton of money.
Back then that was a ton of money, and more than likely you would have been in manufacturing, lumbering, or some particular trade that would have made you quite lucrative and able to afford such a luxury vehicle.
And since the Alpina Flyer till today, technology we know has changed drastically.
Oh, absolutely. One thing to keep in mind is when these cars were manufactured, many of the vehicles on the road were actually horse-drawn. So you were looking at non-paved streets that were still muddy and not actually streamlined to where they are today with segregated lanes and actual speed limitations or, well, other cars per se. You might actually get stuck behind a mule-drawn carriage or something to that effect.
And I know we have heard that the speed limit was set to 6 miles per hour.
Absolutely.
Correct? So could this vehicle, do you know, could it go faster than that?
I believe the speedometer does indicate it could go faster than that. Whether or not people actually opened it up to try it out is another kind of conversation. And I'm guessing due to the quality of the roads, that would definitely impede how fast you'd be willing to take this car.
Because a lot of places they would just have to drive through the grass.
Correct. Yes.
So going any faster than 6 miles per hour
could be detrimental to your health.
Yes, and the vehicle itself, right?
Absolutely.
And now that it's here at Besser, I know you said you guys are all super excited.
Yes.
When you got the phone call that this was going to be an exhibit, what was the atmosphere like here?
Oh, like knowing Christmas Day was tomorrow. Just absolutely sheer excitement. We've been wanting a piece like this just to basically be able to teach the public or raise the awareness in the community that we had something like this in Alpina and that it was a world-class vehicle. But it's also just really nice to have it because the actual car speaks so much more than words or written history would. And photographs are one thing, but I gotta say, between a photograph and the actual car, the actual car is gorgeous.
It is, and I know I've seen many photos of it before this, and then you get here and you see it in person and you can't stop looking at it. Just the grass on the vehicle, everything is so beautiful.
Oh, absolutely, and Restoration Unlimited did a great job, and even Aubin Brothers, who got the car from Chicago to here, did a phenomenal job. Everything on it is mirror finish. They've just made it look like $1 million.
And I know you've recently had your Season of Light gala where you you uncovered the vehicle for the public to see. What's the public's reaction to it so far?
Sheer excitement, definite pleasure, I would say. With our unveiling process, we also had Mr. Ron Winters at the museum discussing the process and the work that he had basically put into getting the car where it is now. And it was really well received. He was talking all night. I don't know that he got a break or anything to that effect, but very well received. And I know that we're getting quite a bit of excitement and phone calls from the public to see it. And it will be here, I know, almost indefinitely, so come in it when you get a chance.
So if people want more information on it, they can...
They can either stop here by the museum, see the car in person. We have a small display revolving around the car. But if they want more detailed information, it would be possibly a good call to stop by the Alpena Public Library and check out the Special Collections Room. Maybe even ask for Mr. Bob Lingus. He's very knowledgeable.
Yes, definitely. And you have more than just the car here for people to see, don't you?
We
A
do.
few other items from the vehicle.
We do. We have several smaller pieces from the car, also some material, photographs, publications. But we also have a current slideshow that shows some of the restoration process that Mr. Ron Winters went through. So you'll see the car from its rusted, very poorly built, I don't even know how to describe it. It doesn't look nothing.
From the basics.
Absolutely. The rotted, rusted frame to, well, its beautiful finished look.
Now, are all the pictures on that slideshow, are they from Mr. Winters?
The ones of the car's restorations are from Mr. Winters. There are a few images on the slideshow that we actually procured from the Alpena Public Library's collection regarding the Alpena Flyer.
Okay. So basically, if anyone else in the community would like to learn more, they can come here and see it.
Absolutely.
Or go to the library, correct?
Absolutely.
And if anyone in the community has a story about the Alpena Flyer or any information, can they call you about that?
Absolutely. We're always looking for more information, either anecdotal or just legitimate newspaper articles. Even if somebody has an artifact that they might like to share with us, we would consider accepting it as a donation, but we'd even borrow it, just because we want to share as much of this history with the community as a whole.
Okay. And now to come see this exhibit, does it cost money for people to come look?
Yes, we do have a free period every Wednesday from 3 to 5. There is no charge, but Monday through Saturday from 10 to 5, it's just $5 adults, $3 for anyone over 60 or under 18, and then kids under 5 are free.
Okay. And like you said, hopefully Mr. Winters will let you guys keep the
Hopefully.
car forever.
Yes.
Has he mentioned any other plans for the vehicle?
Not that I'm aware of, but there may be conversations I'm unaware of. But I would say, just in lieu of that it may not be indefinitely, definitely come and check out the car
So
when you have
everyone
a
needs
chance.
to get here as soon as possible and,
Yes.
and see it in case it doesn't stay forever.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for joining
you.
us on the show today and giving us all your insight to the vehicle.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And tune in next week for another episode of Insights.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.